Now, we all know that Dead Island 2 is about to release, and chances are we all know about the history of development that there has been with Dead Island 2. The game actually started development in 2014, but with a different studio, and then in 2019 the game got another studio, and in between that there was actually another studio as well. So this is the third studio that the game has been on, and finally we are actually getting the game. It's releasing on the 21st of April. And I thought it would be a pretty good idea to actually look at the previous gameplay from 2014. After all, that is when the game started its development process, but things really changed. And of course, we'll be getting the game very shortly, like I mentioned earlier, but I thought it'd be pretty cool to compare the gameplay from 2014 with Dead Island 2 to the 2023 Dead Island 2 gameplay, since we actually have loads of 2023 gameplay now, and there was actually a little bit of 2014 gameplay, since there was actually a 10-minute demo that you could play. And in this video, we'll be going through the 2014 gameplay, and then going through the 2023 gameplay, commenting on some of the differences, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this down in the comments below, since, well, I would assume that there's obviously going to be quite a few improvements from 2014 to 2023. So let's get into the 2014 gameplay first. So here we have the Gamescom footage of Dead Island 2 from 2014. This is in 1080p, so for 2014 that's pretty standard. Now obviously this game was developed for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One way back then, not even near the end of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One's lifespan. This was right at the beginning actually of their life, and obviously this is going to be designed for 1080p. It's probably 30 frames per second to be honest, maybe 60, but to be honest I would expect it at the time to have been 30. And yeah, this is 2014. Let's just get into this gameplay. So as you can see straight off the bat, the quality in the resolution is something very noticeable. Now we are able to obviously see that they are using firearms here, and something interesting actually is that there are actually, you know, the quests are laid out here, and straight off the bat the UI is completely different to what it is now. We're seeing instant differences here between obviously the health up here, and then the way the melee weapons are used, obviously the design of the zombies, the interactions with the zombies are all pretty different. And obviously, yeah, we're seeing different UI down here. This is completely different to how it compares when it comes to the 2023 gameplay, which we'll look at soon. We'll be frequently switching between the two. So obviously this is a suicidal zombie. Now interestingly, I think the overall story and lore has stayed pretty similar from 2014 to 2023. The types of zombies in the game, from what I've seen in this gameplay to what I've seen in the 2023 gameplay, the zombies seem pretty identical, and they generally seem like pretty similar zombies that do pretty similar things with the same names actually. So, you know, it's pretty interesting to see that the same ideas have stayed behind the game, just with maybe different mechanics. And obviously this location I haven't really seen as much of within the Dead Island 2 gameplay. It does seem to be near one of the locations in Dead Island 2, the 2023 gameplay, which I'll show you soon, but overall we've never really seen this sort of suburbs area before within the game. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff here, some pretty interesting weapons. Obviously these weapons I haven't really seen within the 2023 gameplay. This with that knife machete, haven't really seen that much within Dead Island 2, well, at all with the 2023 gameplay. Pretty interesting stuff. Obviously the standard melee weapons and standard firearms, you know, your standard assault rifles and everything like that, I assume will carry over to the 2023 version. But you got to remember that the game was developed from the ground up from 2019, I believe, 2019, 2016, around then. We don't know exactly, of course, since that's all, you know, hidden information, but we do get the idea that, you know, it did actually start development again when it came to the new Dambuster Studios taking over the development for Dead Island 2, since Deep Silver really weren't happy with what the two previous companies had done with the game. They didn't like the approach that they had, and they really wanted to change things up. So that's obviously when we saw the introduction of Dambuster Studios in 2019, when I believe that's when the game was developed from the ground up again. And obviously it looks completely different and was designed for newer consoles, that being the PlayStation 5 and the new Xboxes, but it's still releasing though on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which is nice, since, you know, there would have been people back then at this time in 2014 that were, you know, looking forward to the game releasing in 2015, and obviously they had a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and then obviously for the game to nearly be cancelled, chances are a lot of those players are still on a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So even all these years later, to still be able to play it on that console, even with it nearly being cancelled, you know, it nearly being 10 years since it was first announced, they're still able to play it on a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Pretty cool there. As you can see, this is a demo. There is a timer up here at the top left that shows them this is a demo, so this is by no means a finalized version of the 2014 game, but yeah, pretty cool. Obviously just take a look at things here. There's completely different weapon ideas, which I like. I haven't seen this weapon, for example, in the 2023 gameplay, but obviously we haven't seen all of the 2023 game, so chances are these weapons might actually be be within the new Dead Island 2. But in the old Dead Island 2, these are the weapons we've seen. This is the UI we've seen, and it all looks pretty cool and pretty, you know, for a 2014 game. I think this is absolutely fine. I think the graphics look solid, and I do think that overall the mechanics seem great. I mean, right there, that interaction, really smooth stuff for a 2014 game. I think it's pretty impressive. So it's quite surprising actually that obviously Deep Silver weren't happy with this. They didn't like it clearly, and they got another development team and they still weren't happy with the approach, and then they got a new one. So now let's actually take a look at the 2023 gameplay. So here we are. This is the 2023 gameplay, and I mean right off the bat, you can see the difference in graphics. I mean, this game's a 4K game designed for those next generation consoles, taking advantage of all that powerful hardware. And obviously these days PCs are much more powerful than they were back in 2014. I mean, back then we were still on what, the 980s, 970s and stuff like that. Now we're onto the 4080s and the 4090s when it comes to PC graphics cards. And obviously, yeah, you can really see the changes. And I mean, straight off the bat, you're seeing the changes in UI. The overall idea of the UI, though, interestingly, has stayed the same. Obviously, this is new down here. Some new mechanics clearly have been implemented in the bottom left. But up here, obviously the same ideas stayed, yet it just looks different. It looks cleaner in my opinion, much cleaner. And down here, obviously, we're seeing the weapon, and that's also cleaner in my opinion. Before, it sort of still had that Dead Island 1 vibe to it, but now I think it's, you know, they've really freshened things up, and it looks a lot different. So really cool to see. But as you can see, the actual types of zombies are pretty identical. Obviously, each zombie does look pretty, like, you know, a little bit different, but the actual type of zombie walkers and everything like that seems to be the exact same from Dead Island 2 in 2014. Like I said, I think the lore and everything like that has stayed pretty similar all these years later. But obviously the interactions and the combat here, as you can see with the timings and everything like that, the slow motion moves, that's not really within the 2014 version of Dead Island 2. That's all brand new, and that's really cool to see. So we're going to quickly switch back to the Dead Island 2 from 2014 just so you can see another difference. So here you go. Obviously you can see the frame rate here is lower. This is definitely 30 frames after looking at the other one. But as you can see, the weapons are different. And something interesting is there seems to be a lot more firearms within the 2014 version, at least from the gameplay that we've been able to see. Interestingly, when it comes to 2023 version, the directors actually of Dead Island 2 have said that melee weapons will be the major focus, and that firearms are there for those that want to use them, but the focus is with those melee weapons, and they're actually going to be the more powerful weapons in the game. But interestingly, with the 2014 version, it seems like firearms actually played a bigger part than they do within the 2023 version. Maybe that's something that that Deep Silver wanted when it came to the developers for the game. They wanted melee weapons to be a big focus. Maybe that's the case, but like I mentioned earlier, as you can see, the zombies pretty similar. These are all walkers. I mean, walkers have been there since Dead Island 1, but they also all have different levels, and that is within Dead Island 2 as well. But as you can see, interactions are different. Obviously, the idea of them is fairly similar, but the overall, you know, the smoothness is definitely improved with it being in 2023. So maybe all of this delay has actually been a good thing, since we're able, at the end of the day, to, well, get a better game, a newer game with better frame rate, better graphics, and smoother mechanics, and, you know, smoother transitions and everything like that. Pretty cool, but yeah, now we're going to finally switch over to the 2023 gameplay. So here we are back on the 2023 gameplay. I mean, straight away, you really are seeing that difference in graphics. The UI, in my opinion, looks much cleaner. I mean, these weapons look really nice. These weapons, for example, we didn't see in that Dead Island 1 gameplay, but, you know, you could say that the other way around. We didn't see the Dead Island 1 weapons within the Dead Island 2 gameplay for 2023. Pretty cool stuff, obviously. And I'm also noticing at the top here, we're getting sort of a little mini-map, sort of directions, a compass, really. We don't get that within the Dead Island 2 gameplay from 2014. Pretty cool, and obviously, yeah, the story might be a bit different, but I do believe that the lore has stayed pretty similar throughout all of these changes in development, since obviously we're seeing the same zombies and the same idea is still there behind Dead Island 2, but yeah, it's just a bit different, obviously. Particularly, the main difference for me, really, is when it comes to the graphics. I think, at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest differences. The graphics, the overall mechanics, maybe the weapons, and, you know, of course there's going to be some other differences, but generally speaking, I think the graphics is where we're seeing the biggest difference between the 2023 gameplay and the 2014 gameplay. But there we go, that's the differences when it comes to the 2014 and 2023 gameplay for Dead Island 2, and how it's changed after it's gone through 3 different development teams, and they finally, Deep Silver, have stuck with Dan Buster Studios to release the game on April 21st. But there you go, that was just a, you know, a comparison between the 2 versions of Dead Island 2 that we have access to see. And there you go, that pretty much wraps up things here. We looked at the 2014 gameplay for Dead Island 2, and then we looked at the 2023 gameplay for Dead Island 2. Some big changes, and like I mentioned, mainly on the graphical side of things, to be honest. And yeah, that does just about wrap up things here. Now, I have actually done a video going over the zombies within Dead Island 2, doing a complete guide to the Dead Island 2 zombies, and at least that video is on the screen now if you are interested in watching that.